The distress beacon had been silent for 47 days. Melissa wiped the grease from her hands onto her already filthy flight suit and glanced at the massive form lying in the cave's entrance. Burak hadn't moved in hours, his crystalline scales catching the dim light of Kepler 442b's twin suns. The Draconian's chest rose and fell with labored breaths, each one a reminder that time was running out. "Still here, huh?" Burak's voice rumbled through the translator implant, weak but tinged with that familiar dry humor. "Most species would have eaten me by now," Melissa snorted, climbing over the debris of their crashed cargo hauler. "Yeah, well, humans are weird like that. We tend to get attached to 6-ton space lizards who complain about everything." The crash had happened 3 months ago. A rogue asteroid field, a damaged nav system, and one very unfortunate gravitational pull had sent their ship spiraling into this uninhabited rock. Melissa had walked away with bruises and a dislocated shoulder. Burak hadn't been so lucky. The impact had severed his spinal neural cluster, leaving his powerful hind legs completely paralyzed. In Draconian culture, such an injury was a death sentence. Not because it couldn't be treated, but because the injured were expected to end themselves rather than become a burden. Burak had explained this to her on their second day stranded, his massive amber eyes watching her carefully for signs of understanding, of agreement. Melissa had looked at him for a long moment, then returned to scavenging parts from the wreckage. "Not happening," she'd said. Simply, that had been 89 days ago. The planet was hostile in the way most uncharted worlds were: unpredictable weather, limited food sources, and an atmosphere that was breathable but tasted like burning copper. Melissa had fashioned a shelter extension to the cave using salvaged hull plating. She'd rigged a water collection system from the ship's coolant condensers. She'd even managed to get one of the emergency ration fabricators working, though it only produced a gray paste that tasted like regret. But the real challenge was Burak. Moving a paralyzed Draconian wasn't like moving a paralyzed human. Burak's upper body alone weighed nearly a ton, and his tail, still partially mobile, could accidentally crush her if he thrashed during one of his fever dreams. Yet Melissa had adapted. She'd constructed a pulley system using cargo cables to help reposition him. She'd learned to read the subtle color shifts in his scales that indicated pain or infection. She'd even figured out how to stimulate his lower circulation manually using a modified plasma torch on its lowest setting. "You're insane," Burak had told her one night, his voice thick with something that might have been emotion. "No human should work this hard for a dying alien." "Who says you're dying?" Melissa had replied, not looking up from the medical scanner she was trying to repair. "I've kept worse things running. My first ship had an engine held together with duct tape and spite, but both of them knew the truth. Without proper medical equipment, Burak's condition would only deteriorate. The neural cluster wouldn't regenerate on its own, and the distress beacon, powered by the last functional battery cell, could fail at any moment. On day 93, Melissa found something in the wreckage that changed everything. It was buried beneath a collapsed bulkhead, a cryomedical pod, designed for emergency surgeries during long-haul flights. The display was cracked, and half the systems were fried, but the neural regeneration matrix was intact. Melissa's hands trembled as she realized what this meant. She could fix him. It took her 2 weeks to make the pod operational, 2 weeks of 18-hour days, of cannibalizing every functional system left in the ship, of running calculations until her eyes burned. Burak watched her work with increasing alarm. "Melissa," he said on the 13th day, "the beacon's power cell will die if you drain it for that pod." She didn't stop working. "I know. Without the beacon, no one will find us, ever. I know. You'll die here. We both will." Melissa finally looked up, her eyes bloodshot but determined. "Maybe. Or maybe I fix you, and you fly us both out of here on that intact emergency shuttle that's too small for your paralyzed body to fit in, but just right if you can walk again." Burak stared at her. In all his centuries of life, traveling with dozens of species across hundreds of worlds, he had never encountered anything like humanity's peculiar brand of stubborn optimism. It was illogical. It was reckless. It was why they had survived and thrived in a galaxy that should have crushed them. The procedure took 6 hours. Melissa monitored every reading, made every adjustment, pushed the failing equipment to its absolute limit. When the pod finally opened and Burak's eyes flickered awake, the first thing he did was flex his rear claws. They moved. Tears streamed down Melissa's face as she laughed. the sound echoing through the cave. Burak, still weak but whole, made a sound that was somewhere between a growl and a purr. "You magnificent, insane human," he rumbled. 3 days later, they limped into orbit aboard the emergency shuttle, Burak's newly recovered strength making all the difference in the manual flight. A passing Federation patrol picked up their emergency transponder within hours. When the rescue team asked Melissa why she hadn't activated her personal beacon months ago to save herself, she just shrugged. "He's my crew," she said simply, as if that explained everything. To Burak, it did. In the years that followed, the story spread through the galactic community. The human mechanic who had refused to abandon her partner, who had chosen certain death over easy survival, who had embodied that strange human principle that drove them to drag their companions back from the edge of extinction. Time and again. The galaxy called them reckless. They called them illogical. They called them soft. But they also called them when they needed someone who wouldn't give up. They called them human. And in the end, that made all the difference. The end.